I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. Tonight, my guest is Jen Ritchie. Jen, a photographer whose passion spans both portraits and wildlife. She specializes in senior portraits, families, and business photography, while also creating a beautiful wildlife and nature images from her travels. She's also the host of the Wildlife Conversations podcast, where she interviews wildlife photographers, conservationists, filmmakers, and guides from around the world. Whether she's mentoring photographers or sharing her love of wildlife, her goal is to help others grow creatively. In tonight's presentation, More Than Sharp, Finding Magic in Wildlife Photography, Jen will walk us through elements that enhance our wildlife images and draw viewers in a special way. If you're on Instagram, you can find her at Jen L. Ritchie, and you can connect with her through her socials via Linktree /Jen Ritchie Photography. And I'll link those in the show notes below. Jen, welcome to the Happiness Hour.
Hi, Linda. Thank you
Hi.
so much for having me. What a great group of people you have here. They've already welcomed me, and you just know everyone by name, and I can tell it's a great community.
They're a fun group, and we've been doing this long enough. I've got enough dirt on a bunch of them, so they will behave for you.
They
All
must
right.
behave.
Yeah. So okay, I did my introduction, but fill in
Oh,
the gaps. Take the
yes,
time to let us know what I missed. If there's something that you want to share, this is your opportunity to do that. And
that's great.
otherwise, the screen is yours.
Okay, I actually am going to share a little bit about myself in
Great.
my
Sure.
presentation. So I'll just share my screen now,
Okay.
and everyone can learn more about me. I know this is a new audience for me, and so I thought I would just share a little bit about my journey. And it is it is relevant in that I'm talking about sort of our journey to more creative wildlife images. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about my journey, my creative journey, and to my journey to photography. So I hold many titles in my life. So um, mainly the most important one is mom and wife. I've been married over 30 years and have 5 kiddos and a daughter-in-law now. So most important thing to me. And then my degrees are in English education from Southeast Missouri State and Purdue University. We were talking about that before we got on. And then after 5 kiddos, I decided to work part-time. And so I was a managing editor, and that'll come into play a little bit later, social media manager for different companies. And then a writer. As an English teacher, I also did some writing, which still carries over into my life today. Now I count myself as photographer, wildlife and nature and portrait. I serve the West Lafayette area doing portrait photography, as you said, for seniors and families and businesses. So it's really fun. And then that has evolved into being a podcast host, Wildlife Conversations, and a workshop leader now, leading some tours, and a mentor. And I'll talk about that a little bit later too. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about how I got into photography. So my brother was the artistic one. He was the middle child and had art all over his room, painted his walls, had clay stalagmites or tights or whatever that term is coming down from his ceiling. And I just has 2 degrees in art history. So I always thought he's the art one. I'm the one that's supposed to get straight A students and be straight A grades, and be the one that's the good girl and get the degree and be a teacher and all that. And then about 2017, I took a writing class, and that at the Lafayette Writers Studio here in Lafayette, Indiana. And that was life changing for me. And I realized that I did have creativity to give to myself and to others that wanted to be a part of that. And so that was an intensive writing group where we wrote our chapters and shared them with one another. And I would say that really gave me a permission to be a creative. Around that same time, I bought my first DSLR camera. I'd always wanted one, and I just never spent money on myself. It was always the kids. So I carried a Canon point and shoot for my whole life. As long as I can remember, I had a Canon point and shoot. So in 2017, bought my first DSLR with the kit lens, and I think I had the 70 to 300, and that was the Canon Rebel T6i, and I bought that for a trip to Banff. It was like a bucket list trip we were going to take. So we were doing that, and started shooting nature. We had been traveling to national parks our whole marriage from college on. And so finally getting some of those images I wanted to get in some of those wild spaces. And then around that time, I was a managing editor of a couple local magazines here. And so sometimes I was in charge of getting the stories. We were not going to have a story unless I went out and got the story. So I found myself with camera in hand, photographing parades, businesses, families, kids, whatever the activity was. And so I think that gave me practice, but also gave me bravery. I sometimes need a role to feel like I'm in the right place or doing the right thing. And that role of the camera being behind the camera really gave me a bravery, and which I think was really helpful for what was coming. And then in 2018, I was heading from Yellowstone with my family into the Tetons, and saw my first grizzly cubs. I'd seen a male grizzly before and photographed it, but had never seen one of the roadside female bears in the Tetons, and photographed her with her cubs. It's totally life-changing for me. Joined the sea of people and tried to get the best images I could. But that started a love of the Tetons that still exists now, and is really the focus of my work. And then in that same trip, I decided I would start an Instagram account, a nature one. Did not feel brave enough, but I thought I'm going to do it under a pseudonym. So I did my first Instagram account under a pseudonym so that no one could find it. I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't quite ready for the world to see my photography yet. And then in 2009, I mentioned before we got on, my friend Dave Weigel here in my neighborhood, amazing Lafayette, Indiana photographer. He was switching to Sony. And so I upgraded all my gear from that Rebel into the 5D Mark IV and some other lenses. And I was learning just voracious. I was voracious about photography, learning portrait and wildlife and how to run a business all at the same time. And just completely addicted, and had found my purpose. Then in 2020, when the pandemic hit, we had plans to go to Rocky Mountain National Park. And because initiated that reservation system, we switched quickly to the Tetons because prices had been slashed. And I don't know if people know Grizzly Bear 399. She had her quads. So we switched to the Tetons, and Steve Mathis, a Jackson Hole photographer and guide, award-winning photographer, happened to have an opening at the last minute. And so I took that opening, had never, ever spent that much money on myself for a workshop, and never taken a workshop. And that was my very first just experience learning from someone else. I was really longing for a wildlife expert to help me, and it was really hard to find here in Indiana. So finding Steve probably was one of the biggest life-changing moments of my life. And he has been instrumental to my photography in terms of if you know his work, you know he's a master at combining the technical with the art. And so that has been I've done so many workshops with him, and now we go out as friends. We led tours together last year together. So many coaching calls. I was just so intense and annoying, I think. But was very understanding and helpful, and is still one of my greatest helps and friends. So during this time, I was completely obsessed, shooting everything locally that I could in all weather, taking some big adventures as the years went on. I'll talk about that in a second. Practice as much as I could, tried to be consistent, found Steve and got his feedback. Used the best gear that I could afford at whatever period. And so I upgraded eventually to the Canon R5, 2 Canon R5s, and the 400 f2.8. And just tried as many genres as I could. If the kids needed musical, a photographer for their musical, I was there, or soccer, or football, all those things. I was practicing, practicing, practicing. Some of the pivotal moments, I think, were just stepping out in fear when I was scared to travel alone or scared to take a trip by myself. I went to Alaska in 2024. I'm embarrassed to say, like, I had never taken an Uber by myself. So that was like the first time doing some of those things. And then in 2025, I went I guess last year with Siler Peralta Ramos, and he and I, just a trip of a lifetime off of a ship-based trip in Katmai. And he and I now teach together in 3-month coaching cohorts, and we're leading together in December. So it's just been the last, 9 years stepping out and taking actionable steps for personal and creative growth, and just never imagined that I would be here. And it's just such a blessing. Um, and then that same trip, that first trip in Alaska, I was with, after separate trips, I met Maureen Matson, a photographer, Utah photographer, and Idaho photographer, Jenny Cannon, in Anchorage. And we just sort of did a debrief of our trips. And so that we were talking about how we need someone to talk about these Alaska trips, how we would love to hear different stories and different voices and tell about their Alaska trips and how they did them and the many ways to do all these trips, just so we know beforehand. And then we also were discussing, like, we would love to hear more women in wildlife. There are so many women, especially women over 40. There are so many altogether, but women over 40 are often invisible or ignored. And we just kept seeing the same people on YouTube and podcasts and panels. And we just really wanted to hear new voices of the people we were following on Instagram. So Maureen said, Jen, you should start a podcast. And so Wildlife Conversations was born. And so we're going to do our 50th episode in a couple of weeks. So it's just been such a blessing. And I'm so thankful to share people's stories, men and women. And it's been a great endeavor. I hope it continues for a while. This is my gear list in case anyone, sometimes people are techie and they want to see your gear list. I am not techie. I am very, I know the technical, but I'm way more into the creative process and the artsy side of it. So, but this is the technical stuff, my gear. I also wanted to share this image of this moose because it was also a pivotal moment of just learning, which we're going to talk about, magical moments and clean backgrounds. And that was a winter where that all started to sort of click and come together. I think that was 2022, and things just started clicking better. You have those moments where there's a growth spurt, and that was kind of a growth spurt. So in terms of creative process, I think all throughout this, I was learning how to trust myself more as an artist, giving myself permission to be creative, giving myself permission to risk and to make the images I wanted to make. Also learning that past the technical, there needed to be more. There needed to be more than just a technically perfect image. So I started asking myself, is a great wildlife image more than its sharpness? How can we bring magic to an image and showcase our subject? And I started putting together, like, okay, I need a little snippet of magic in each image, and to make that animal enhanced and stand out, and to showcase it as best as I possibly could for my viewers and my audience, and for me and for that animal. And so I really started looking for magic in my photography. So some of the myths that I feel like we sort of bump up against in the photography world are everything in the frame should be sharp. Like you have to shoot at f8 or you have to shoot at f16 or whatever that is. And I just think that you use the tool you want to use to make the image you want to make. And sometimes you have that creatively in your mind, or sometimes you're working a scene and you want to try different things. And so sometimes different apertures and different things work better. But I don't believe that everything in an image has to be sharp. I, of course, want my technical skill to show, the eye sharp, the face sharp, or whatever, the claws. But I like how things fall away. And so that goes along with you can't shoot wide open. I often shoot wide open, if it allows, if the situation allows. And so if that's I don't like hard and fast rules. So that's not one that I follow. Um, Many times on the podcast, I hear people saying they wanted to do wildlife photography and there wasn't a path. The art department didn't see it as valid. The biology department didn't know what to do with them. And so they have to create their own way. But I think we who are doing this realize that wildlife photography is art, and there are special ways that you can do it to make it stand out and be just really captivating. And so I hope that wildlife photography is moving more towards people realizing it is an art. Technical perfection makes a great image. Of course, you want to know your technical, you want to know your foundational things, but I think images are so much more than that. And then I think another one is you should have a high keeper rate. And I think I'm totally opposite. I want to sketch a scene and take as many photos as I want. And if I keep a couple, then I feel like I made the image I wanted to make. I'm never hard on myself for not being able to keep a lot of images. I want to work that scene and be as creative as possible. So I don't limit myself in terms of that. Those are just a few. There's so many photography things we hear over and over. But when we are sketching a scene and making an image, what can we look for that adds more? What elements will showcase our subject? And there are so many, but if we imagine we're standing in the field and some of those foundational things come to mind, we're thinking of our settings, we're thinking of the safety, we're thinking, are we ethically photographing this animal? What is the light? What is our timing? What position should we be in? Should I be low? Should I be standing? What angle? Horizontal, vertical? What's my composition in this scene? How many compositions can I see here? But then past that, if we start looking at that scene, how can we add magic? What's available to us where we can enhance that subject, showcase it as best we can, and create some kind of interest and magic inside that frame. So I know in terms of what we include in the frame, we have to be ruthless. Like every element is giving us a clue and it's giving us visual cues as to the story of that image. So I'm always watching, like, what do I want to include, but what do I want to omit? And so some of those things that I'm watching for are gesture and movement, like power, light, of course. The background, I think maybe after my subject, the background is what I'm looking at the most. Leg position is so important in wildlife photography. Spacing is so important in wildlife photography, and using negative space. The weather and atmosphere, I just love shooting in snow and fog. That brings so much magic. And then story, how can we tell a story, and what visual cues do we leave in the frame? So those are some things we're going to look at, and I'm going to show some of my own images and kind of talk through my process of why I chose those images and what I was looking for in that image. In terms of this image, this is the bighorn sheep in the Tetons, excuse me, and during the rut. And so what I was looking for here is that curve to sort of draw the viewer in of all their horns joining together. I wanted to make sure that every animal's eye was showing, because an eye will draw a viewer in. We are drawn to eyes and faces. And I wanted to show the tension of that moment and how they rub together and antagonize one another. And just loved that clean white background. So, and another thing, I just want to say quickly, I know that I am not looking in terms of, I'm not saying these images are perfect. These are just images that I love and moments I love and images that I thought would be good examples, but I'm not saying in any way that they're perfect. This is an image that I think displays gesture really well. It was an image that I was had already sort of pre-visualized in my head before I went to Katmai last year. I wanted a koi looking up at a mother and looking at what she was eating. And I wanted him underneath her like that, him or her. So we got to watch this family of triplets for about 2.5 hours in the rain. And so what I really wanted was that cub to come underneath her and do some kind of gesture looking up. And so I have a whole burst of images, series of images that when I came home, and I picked this one because her mouth is attractive. She's not, sometimes animals look really goofy when they're eating. And so I don't want her mouth gaping open or just looking unattractive. I want her to look as good as possible. But I also like that grass hanging out. So I was watching her expression and then the baby looking up with that beautiful little face and then the drips connecting the two of them. That was the only photo I had with the drips. And so that is why I picked that one. But I just think that's a really good example of familial connection and gesture. This is also off the Katmai Coast, and just another example of waiting for some kind of familial connection to happen. And this mother and pup just, they were swimming along and then happened to grab each other and hold on and then look right at us. So I love that connection to the viewer with the eyes and face, and also that gesture of holding hands. That often connects because we can relate to our own families and our own children, how we do that. And it will connect to the viewer. Another example of gesture, you're waiting for an animal to stand or do something fun that you know it can do, but many times they have their heads down and you're waiting and waiting. This little one, I was about to switch batteries and thankfully looked up, and this yearling, or I think she may have been almost 2, stood up and got to get the claws and that grass hanging out, and she looked right at us, and the soft foreground in front of her. And so just waiting for those moments, those little special magic moments that happen. I will always treasure. That was the cutest cub I've ever seen. She was in Katmai, and she and her mother were just perfect specimens of brown bears. Um, and this is another example of rams. Like, I know people really love rams crashing, and the power of that, which is great. But I really love the tension that is displayed in the rut season, and the antagonizing of each other and just the rubbing. It's almost like we like each other, we're friends, but we're going to kill each other. We hate each other. But I just love that. And so I love the S curve of the horns and both eyes showing, and the tension, the clean background, and the weather, some of the snowflakes showing in that image. So another example of sort of gesture, background, and pose and story. This is a great example of just light, backlight. So just, those mornings that you wish for and you hardly get. So this was one of those mornings that it was just, other photographers were there. We looked at each other afterwards, like, I can't believe that just happened. But I would think my ISO was at 100 here. So I had so much room with my shutter speed, and the light and the steam from his body and the breath from the bugle fog, they were just lighting up white against the dark background. So looking for dark backgrounds, looking for that beautiful chin and prance. It's so elegant and regal. You're waiting for that chin to come up. You're waiting, you want all the antler and the points to show and just be displayed. And I would say I was definitely at a low angle here to show power in that animal. And when I got home, I had a burst of images. So looking for that leg position that I wanted, 4 legs are showing, powerful step forward. I'm showing that elk in the most powerful position that I can from that scene. So that's just an example there of light and background, gesture, power, movement. And just as I culled through those images, looking for those things. Just another gesture and story here. They came and nursed right in front of us, all 3 triplets again. And it was just a really moving scene. And so we got up to leave thinking it was over, and thankfully did not shut our cameras off because one of the little ones started walking on her back as she was trying to sleep. And she let it happen for a few seconds and then sat up and threw him off. And so I have the whole series, which I'm going to show a little bit of that later. And so I was looking for in that series the face showing, the paws showing, the clinging, and just that that there's some power of him being thrown off. So another example of sort of that movement and gesture of looking for. Just looking at light and waiting for that backlight to happen, and use exposure compensation here to go down a stop. I can't remember exactly, but it was going down in my exposure compensation to blur out that foreground of mucky water and to make the pelican's backlight stand out even more. The background's not great, so that exposure compensation darkened that background too. But just waiting for that light to show. And this is also an example of spacing and using negative space. I wanted every bill or beak to show. I wanted each pelican to stand out. And so that when they finally came around and they came around into the sunset after a couple hours. And when they spaced like that, I knew that was the one that I wanted. This is probably one of my favorite Teton mornings. I was actually on a workshop with Steve Mathis, and the morning just like blew up with fog, and just gorgeous, gorgeous morning in the fall, September 22nd, I think, 2021. And just beautiful ribbons of fog. And so I'm looking for that silhouette, the mouth to be open, bugling. I'm looking for the antlers to show, um, looking for the negative space so that that all stands out. And also color theory. I didn't mention that, but color theory, watching the gold and the blue and keeping that all in so that that works as well, and to tell that story of that morning. So background and light and gesture, story, all coming in one time, one place. Same with this image, looking at the same things, looking for that powerful leg position, the splash, the bugle. Those antlers are showing that powerful bull elk. And this is just a quintessential elk photo from the Tetons, one I have never gotten again. My first fall in the Tetons, and I've never been able to get that again. But just magical moment. And I have to say, like, I totally like had some tears after that one. Totally was excited. Just another example of weather, how to use weather. Snow, of course, is so fun to shoot in. Getting those covered faces, powerful leg position, coming forward, getting low so that animal looks powerful, especially big land animals. It's fun to get low and like let them look even bigger. And then in the one with the 3 bison, I like the odd number. So odds are really fun. Odds are somehow appealing to us more. Um, Another example of movement and atmosphere and weather. So sort of foggy, lots of splash from this cow and cow moose. And I will note, like, the background in this area and everything turns sort of green. You're in a bowl. And so that's why this image is in black and white. The color is not great there. And so I switched it to black and white, just trying to draw out the contrast of the water and the splash, and the moose. Moose are my favorite. So this is a little famous little owl in Indiana. Her name is Ruby. And we don't get off the path, so everybody gets the same shot. So if you have different weather, you really race out there to use the weather to get her. And so this was a spring snow. And so I wanted a really soft color palette, soft look, and she was very like discombobulated. And you could tell in her expression that she was like, what is this? I thought we were done with snow. But so just using her eyes and her expression to draw the viewer into that focal point, and then just letting everything else sort of soften around her, and trying to get something different because we all have the same image of her. Same thing here. I had a Vancouver Island in Port McNeill, went out on a Zodiac and photographing humpback whales and orcas and otters, and so foggy we could hardly see. So I asked myself, like, how am I going to do this? What am I going to use in this scene? So it really was about mood, and showing that fog. They almost look like they're in black and white, but it was just a really foggy, moody morning. And then how to bring that out with what the behavior was that morning, just including splashes and mouths open and things like that morning. And then just a trip to Brooks Falls. So the next images are kind of like full like story, like what was happening in that in those instances. And in this one, I just wanted to tell the story of Brooks Falls. We really were there too early. And so we were there all day, and this is the only bear we saw. So I got to play around a little bit with shutter speed, and so tried to lower my shutter speed to, like, I think about 1/40th, 1/30th, I can't remember. And just slow that water at Brooks Falls and showcase that bear. There were no salmon yet. They were there a couple of days later, I think. So just trying to make that a beautiful scene, even though the iconic salmon were not there. I think that might be Chunk. I'm not sure. I'd have to check that, but I do have some of him. Another Alaska photograph that I had pre-visualized. I wanted a brown bear in a reflection on the beach with mountains behind. And when it started to happen, I like couldn't believe it, because we really were mainly on the beach with a humpback whale that had washed up. So all the bears were traveling in to see it, but this bear went to the ocean alone. And happened to, when we went down the beach to the ocean to see it, there happened to be a sort of a pool of water that got trapped. And so as it started walking towards the other direction, and that pool was there, I was like, knew right away, like, that I want that photo. And we were just battling heat haze so badly. I was hoping that I could do something with it. So just played with that sort of misty haze, and the wanted the four legs of the bear to show. I wanted a powerful forward motion with that front leg. You can see the claws just a little bit. Wanted that reflection inside the mountains reflection, and like have the humps mimic the mountains. And then just let the eye be drawn to the right as the shore goes on along, and trying to use rule of thirds there. If I could change anything, I would not have my horizon line in the back, just cut him, but that's the only thing I had that day. And really just was really thankful for that moment. Um, Another, I didn't mention this before, but I'll mention it with this. I talked about leg position, and that's something really important in terms of, I'm thinking of like elk and pronghorn and bison and animals like that. Many times when they're running in that sequence, they can look like they have a broken leg. So you have to be really careful when you pick your images. I honestly, I can scroll Instagram and I can see a lot of paws that are broken, antelope legs that look broken. You really have to wait for that and pick that strong position going forward, and not the dangling leg position. Just if you can take that burst, and hopefully, out of that burst, you'll have a strong leg position. So I'm always watching that. And I'm usually in high speed continuous on electronic shutter. And I'm taking a burst as they're going by, and hoping when I get home that when I start my process, I will find the legs in a good, strong position. And this is a morning in the Tetons where I had a lot of time to sketch the scene. I used different lenses, used different things in the foreground, and used that light as long as possible. It was just a gorgeous, gorgeous morning. One of those you just don't forget. And I liked the odd number of bison in the foreground, like that baby sort of kicking up that tail, like that I can see all four legs on all the animals, on all the bison. Liked how they were spaced. And then I also, bison can really bunch up from the background to another. Like if you've got a bison in the foreground, you're really focusing on, bison can really bunch up in the background and look like just splotches on them. So I really like that negative space around each bison so that they are defined. I can see them. You can see that there are bison all out through that, all that through that range. And so and then of course the grand, just showcasing that grand. And you've got to have the grand in your photo. When I first did a workshop with Steve, we were at this spot and taking photos, and he's like, you just cut the grand out, the top of the grand off the photo. And I'm like, wait, what? How are you seeing that? And I just didn't know. I don't live with the mountains. I'm not in mountains every day. And so just like it didn't take me, that took me one time. I know now, never cut the top off the grand. So you've got to showcase her, and that shows your audience, your viewer, what that picture is about. Just quintessential Tetons, with bison and that the grand right there, and just beautiful fog and clouds. So um, great example um, of trying a burst and hopefully getting home and finding all those bison separated and the legs looking good. I was really thankful for that great morning. And then another bear on the Katmai coast, and just her name is Flo, and she's just a beautiful clamming bear. And we had photographed her in portraits, very close up, and then we moved on to something else. And as I turned, I looked back, and there she was, still clamming for hours and hours, and just that beautiful scene. And so all four legs are showing. She's doing what she's always doing, clamming, and just a memory for me of what Katmai looked like. And just hold that close for those memories that we made. And just love that bear. She was so sweet. I mean, as sweet as bears can be. And then in terms of, so kind of walking through our preparations before we go out, and then during the shoot, what we're looking for. And then then we get home and we're processing our images. And so that's another chance that we're going to find that magic that we were looking for. And so all those choices as we're moving through that process are creating the voice and style and art that we're making, and that each one of us can make and give to the world. So this is an example of that bear when she threw him off. I picked that last one because I liked the face, seeing that face the most. I really love the back paw in the middle, but the face showing and looking right at the camera was trump the other two. And I have so many of those. But that last one, it just was the final choice because of seeing the paw a little bit and just that face, that cute face showing. All right, so this is an example again of just getting home with images and picking through. And I have probably 20 of this, but this is three that I, didn't two that I didn't choose. I just wanted to show you that first one is like that broken paw again, not a strong paw coming forward or, in a cute position. I want to see the claw. I want to see it up. I want to see something. And her mouth is not really that attractive either. Then the second one, not looking at the camera. So I kind of X that one. And then the last one, I like the paw showing. I like her looking at me in the camera, connecting with the viewer. And I love that little paw where I can see the claws. So that was ultimately the one I picked of that sweet little cub. And then in terms of this one, I had horizontal images of this. And I didn't like the way that looked. Had vertical choices of this. Didn't love the legs since it looks like he only has two legs and really not looking anywhere. So this ultimately was my final choice. The legs showing in the front, looking a little bit more, using negative space to show the winter background and showcase the animal and maybe the direction it was moving. So that's just a few examples of how you get home and you're still choosing the image that you want the most and creates the magic you prefer the most. And so you're still honing that voice, honing your style, and creating the images you want to create. So David Duchemin said, art doesn't come from the artifice, the tools, the tricks, the techniques, but from something more. It comes from you and the choices you make. And I believe that so much in the photographers that I love and that I talk to. I just love how people can take a scene and make their own art. And there's so many possibilities of what we can create. So if you, I offer more learning experiences. And as I said before, Siler Peralta Ramos and I do a 3-month mentoring cohort, which has been amazing. We do virtual calls every month and a private Facebook group. It's just been wonderful. Seiler is mentored by Tom Mangelson and works for him and is just an amazing guide and wildlife photographer in his own right. We're also doing a Teton Winter workshop. One is already sold out, but we have the 8th and 9th available. And then Wildlife Conversations always has people on talking and teaching, and you can hear so many people's stories. And then you can find me on Instagram or YouTube and my website. And I just want to thank you, Linda, for having me. It's been a privilege.
The pleasure has been mine, and I'm betting a few other people in this room have enjoyed your presentation as well.
Well, I
Um,
appreciate it.
yeah, okay, so I'm gonna scoot a question that just came in here
Okay.
for you. It's coming from Kathy from Idaho. She
Okay.
wants to know, how close are you to the bears? And she says,
Oh,
looking at the photos, she was even backing up in her chair just a little bit. Yeah,
well, let me stop my share here and like we can just talk.
yeah.
Um, well, of course, I'm always following the ethical guidelines of whatever area or park that I'm in. So Tetons, it's 100 yards. Katmai, I'm with a guide. Um, and many times in the Tetons, you're in your vehicle, and you have rangers present. In Katmai, it's very different. Alaskan brown bears on the coast in Katmai are very different than any other bear. You are with a guide and you can let the bear come to you, but you're listening to your guide, and whatever he says or she says, you're in your group and doing what they say. But those bears are different in that they've grown up seeing people walk in and observe them. They've watched their mothers do it. Now they do it. They teach their cubs to do it. They have plenty to eat in terms of nourishment. They don't care about you at all. They can see for miles and miles any threats. So Katmai is just a little piece of paradise that's a little bit different. So,
Okay.
but always obeying the guides, always following ethical standards.
Okay. Um, there are, I will share this chat with you. There are lots of nice comments in here, which
Oh,
I
thank you
fully
so much.
expected. Your images are beautiful. You've got
Thank
a
you.
huge collection of beautiful stuff. I want to say it was you, Donna, because as you typed it, I thought it, and then I saw your comment pop up there. But Jen, one of the things that I took away from your presentation, your photos, is how well you use negative space
Mm.
and that environmental portrait and the
Hmm.
layers. It's okay. I'm gonna have to give the Grand Teton. I went to the Grand Tetons once. And I was told there were a lot of elk. I saw zero elk. I don't know what was going on. It was a weird time to go, I
Yeah.
guess. And I just thought, there's nothing here. And all your photos have proved me wrong. So I have got to put it back on my list.
Well, I have to say, elk are very hard in the Tetons. They're very hard. Once the sun comes up, they are in the trees. So they're not always around. They are hunted in that park. And so they
Okay.
act much differently than like Rocky Mountain National Park or the Smokies.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they are very skittish. Yeah.
Well, I even went to something that said the elk refuge. Where are the
Oh, yes, yes.
there
Well,
was not one elk in the elk
oh
refuge.
no,
So
oh no.
I felt that was false.
They usually start
Yeah.
coming late fall, early, yeah, winter. They're
Yeah,
there.
it
Yeah.
was false advertising. I don't know. It worked. I drove up there. Ma'am, I want to thank you for giving us your Wednesday night and spending
Thank
time here
you.
with us. I so appreciate it. Oh, quick question, because I meant to look and I didn't. Do you have a newsletter? Do you,
I do. Yes, I
okay,
do have an email list. Yes. And you can,
okay.
that Linktree
Mhm.
link
Okay.
has where you can join that email
Okay.
list. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right. With that, I don't see any other questions in here. Let me close out your session. And if you have a
Yeah.
minute to stick around, I
Yeah.
bet few
Absolutely.
people will stick around too.
Okay. That
All
sounds
right.
great.
Well, thank you so much. All right.
Thank you,
Next,
Linda.
you're very welcome. All right. Next week, Jerry Akita will be here to present More Than a Workshop, Growth Through Photography. Y'all have a great night and we'll see you again soon.